Hello and welcome to this Catholic Prison Ministry Coalition Town Hall meeting. I'm Father George Williams with the Catholic Prison Ministry Coalition, and today we're going to be discussing the securitization and criminalization of immigration and how we can be empowering immigrant leaders. And our speakers today are Dr. Maria Vidal de Jaimes and Elena Segura. And I'll introduce them in a moment, but first let's begin with a prayer. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Lord, you told us in Exodus that you shall not oppress or afflict a resident alien, for you were once aliens residing in the land of Egypt. We ask you, Lord, for your grace and your strength in these days, that we can watch out for and care for those who are among us who are undocumented, for those who are immigrants, for the migrants in our country. We pray for justice and mercy for all involved, and we pray for a return to a time of compassion. We ask you, Lord, to bless our time together and bless all who are involved in the problem and the opportunities of immigration in our country today. We make this prayer through Christ our Lord. Amen. So our presenters today are both representing the National Pastoral Migratoria, which is a groundbreaking ministry. It forms, equips, and uplifts immigrants to lead with faith, compassion, and justice. And we're going to be discussing how dioceses and parishes can build sustainable infrastructures for immigrants and migrants to engage in service, accompaniment, and justice actions. Our presenters again, Dr. Maria Vidal de Jaimes is a professor at Loyola University Chicago of Social Work, where she directs the Center for Immigrant and Refugee Accompaniment and the Migration Studies subspecialization. Dr. Vidal de Jaimes leads a migration-focused international social service exchange between Loyola University, the Universidad Iberoamericana, Mexico City, Jesuit Migrant Services of Mexico, and Catholic Charities of the Archdiocese of Chicago, where she also serves on the Board of Advisors. Her work focuses on migration, poverty, inequality, and social justice, with a commitment to company-based models of care. Also joining us from Chicago is Elena Segura. She founded Pastoral Migratoria in 2008 as an immigrant-led ministry for service, accompaniment, and justice in parish communities. And since the 2005 inception of Pastoral Migratoria, Elena has, and also the inception of the USCCB Catholic Campaign for Immigration Reform, from which the Pastoral Migratoria was born. Elena has directed the Archdiocese of Chicago's immigration ministry, facilitating formation of pioneering networks of 200 priests, 54 religious orders, and immigration liaisons in 127 native-born parish congregations. Elena began her career organizing grassroots responses to problems facing her community in rural Peru. So for those of you joining us live today, I would ask you to write any comments or questions in your chat feature, and after the presentations, we'll have time for Q&A. So welcome, Dr. de Jaimes, and also Elena Segura. Glad to have you with us today.
First of all, good day to everybody, and thank you, Father Williams, for that warm introduction. I would also like to thank our friends at the Catholic Prison Ministries Coalition for the invitation to share some of our thoughts with you today. My dear friend and colleague, Elena Segura, will talk to you about the work of the National Pastoral Migratoria in accompanying migrants and their families in difficult moments, including situations of detention and deportation. What I will do is provide an overview of migration securitization and criminalization trends, the context in which this ministry occurs. So greater border enforcement and mass deportations were two major pledges made by Donald Trump during his presidential campaign, and his first months of office have honored this pledge. He's issued numerous related executive orders and actions in pursuit of these goals. The most recent ICE statistics indicate that there are nearly 67,000 individuals currently in immigration detention, nearly 188,000 under electronic monitoring or alternatives to detention. And so far this year, 71,405 individuals have been deported or removed, and another 78,500 persons have been placed in removal proceedings. Multiply all these figures by the family members of these individuals, and you'll get a better view of the magnitude of the numbers of individuals impacted by detention and deportation. But detention and deportation are not new to this administration. Rather, the current administration is simply continuing some related trends, albeit in an accelerated manner. I'll begin by talking about what's meant by the securitization of migration. It's important to understand that general securitization of migration in order to analyze the dynamics and consequences of the way that many governments are acting and justifying their policies in response to current movements of vulnerable people. I'm mostly going to focus on the United States, but this is some global trends that we see. Prior to the 1990s, transnational migration tended to be treated by nation states as either an issue of humanitarian concern, economics, or civil law. Some theorists have argued that international framings of migration as a security issues began to change during the end of the Cold War, followed by the spread of neoliberal globalization, destabilizing prevailing international knowledge about what constituted security threats. These theorists posit that post-World War threats were from a clash of civilization, rogue states, or non-state actors like terrorists. Also, issues which had not previously been associated with security, such as development and health, began to be linked as security concerns. At the same time, a parallel and contradictory discourses were offered by international organizations such as United Nations that offered a different perspective, one of human security, proposing a shift in the reference of security away from nation states towards individual people. Another marker of the post-Cold War period was that of globalization, an era in which we were to be less economically, culturally, and even politically constrained by state borders. It turns out that wealthier nations were enticed by the economic opportunities of globalization, allowing for the free movement of capital, finance, and products, and consumer culture and popular culture. But they were not so enamored by the free movements of people, particularly those from the global south to the global north. Consequently, for all these reasons, some argue that migration is now increasingly framed as a security threat and a potentially criminal offense against state sovereignty. On a symbolic level, the pivot facilitates a connection of migration with criminality in the popular mind, stigmatizing all migrants, regardless of their immigration status. On a practical or material level, the securitization of migration involves the consolidation and technological and physical controls beyond the geographical limits of borders. These include, but are not limited to, increased physical border walls, the militarization of border walls, new technologies of surveillance, and to bureaucratic borders created against migration in the form of difficult to access visas. Another important trend that has occurred during this period is the externalizing and internalizing of borders, where states exercise internal and external border control. These trends continue the line of presenting migration as a danger to public order, to cultural identity, to labor, and to market stability, and increasingly associating migration with terrorism and crime. All of these associations have generated securitized discourses which legitimate border closures, mass detention, and deportation. We also see a process emerging during this period that some have dubbed as crimmigration, a shift away from treating migration within civil law to criminal law, emphasizing issues of illegality, detention and deportation, and border checks. It's an important symbolic and legal shift in implementation with far-reaching repercussions. We can see in the 1980s a move to overlap or integrate these two areas of law, criminal law and immigration law. Up until the 1980s, citizens and non-citizens, regardless of their status, were mostly punished alike for crimes. But in the 1980s, we start to see criminal and immigration law begin to mingle. I'll give you a couple of policy examples. One is the Immigration Reform and Control Act, or IRCA, of 1986 under the Reagan administration. This law criminalized the act of knowingly hiring an undocumented immigrant and established financial penalties for those employing immigrants unauthorized to work. It introduced the I-9 form, which I'm sure we're all familiar with, that's used to check work eligibility. Criminal use of false documents plus immigration offenses for being in the U.S. without authorization are beginning to be vetted out through this process. Later, E-Verify system, an electronic program through which employers verify the employment eligibility of their employees after hire. So we start seeing like the building of the apparatus for this. In 1996, the Illegal Immigration Reform and Immigrant Responsibility Act under the Clinton administration. This act created more stringent immigration laws pertaining to admission and deportation and broadened the types of crimes that could lead to deportation by greatly expanding the range of criminal convictions, including relatively minor nonviolent ones for which legal permanent residents or green card holders could be automatically deported. It also eliminated key defenses against deportation and subjected many more migrants or immigrants, including legal permanent residents, to detention and deportation, and it instituted bars for reentry. So suddenly, non-citizens with criminal charges also faced possible immigration penalties as well. So if you're a non-citizen being charged with the crime, your immigration status may very well be in jeopardy. Even relatively small charges can have significant impact on immigration status, such as drug possession, public intoxication, theft, and other petty crimes. Those are a few examples of crimmigration, the nexus of immigration and criminal law. We can associate crimmigration with the interiorizing of the border or enforcement of immigration policies within the border in the interior of the country. So we see programs such as Secure Community that is varied in name over time, but functions in a similar way where ICE and police work together, increases in workplace rates, the Real ID Act, E-Verify that I mentioned already, and increasing use of biometrics and surveillance that range from facial recognition, electronic monitoring, ankle bracelets, the vetting or surveillance of people's use of I'm forgetting the name of that, things like social networking platforms. I can't remember the name right now. It'll come back to me in a minute. So some scholars are now referring to this as digital cages that take physical and psychological toll on immigrants with this constant surveillance. And often this data collection is used to identify and track individuals with the goal of deportation. And the surveillance we're experiencing is wide-reaching and includes the integration of databases, the mining of big data, even the data from, until recently, from Ring security systems on the doorbells that many people use, were being given to ICE to use for immigration enforcement. And that now that's the monitoring of social media is what I meant to say. And the use of facial recognition technologies and biometrics such as retinal scannings, fingerprints, and DNA. So the externalization of border, in contrast, refers to a range of tactics used by wealthier countries such as the United States to control immigration flows beyond our territorial borders. This approach allows powerful destination states or receiving countries such as the US to influence the movement of potential migrants even before they reach the physical border of our country or these countries through a series of extraterritorial activities carried out both within both the countries of origin and transit states. Externalization aims to screen and deter migrants in various stages of the journey. These strategies include checkpoints at transit countries, offshore visa requirements, pre-departure screenings, ultimately creating a multi-layered barrier that separates migrants from their intended destinations. So in some ways, it's an outsourcing of immigration enforcement to bordering countries or transit countries. Examples of outsourced border control policies can be seen in several agreements between the United States with countries like Canada, which allows U.S. immigration officials to screen passengers before they enter the United States, or border inspections occurring at Canadian airports where passengers undergo security checks to prevent unauthorized entry into the United States. Similarly, the U.S. Coast Guard patrols areas like the Caribbean, focusing on preventing migrants from Haiti, Cuba, and other countries from reaching the U.S. soil. Furthermore, transit countries situated between sending and receiving states play a critical role in enforcing these extraterritorial measures. For example, the United States and Mexico have intensified their partnership to curb Central and South American migration. Mexico's enforcement includes establishing checkpoint and strict visa requirements along its borders, essentially containing migrants before they reach the United States. I'm concerned about time. I was going to talk a little bit about how this also impacts transit communities, where migrants are being already positioned as a security threat and criminals before they even arrive in the United States.
Oh, we got time.
Pardon me?
We got plenty of time. You can go.
Okay, then I guess I can let me go back to that. So externalization often impacts transit zones themselves, transforming these areas from temporary points of passage into places where prolonged or indefinite residence for migrants who cannot move forward. Mexico, which has been seen as a source country for migration, I'm sorry, yeah, source country for migration, a sending country for migrants, and a transit country for migrants, and also a place for return migrants because of deportation, is now becoming a destination community for a country for migrants who can't move forward or move back, and some are now seeking asylum in Mexico or there for prolonged periods of time, for example. So that's an example of how some of these externalizing of border policies have impacted migration flows. Um, One of the most challenging outcomes of these outsourced border control measures is the increased violence, exploitation, and human rights violations that migrants endure within these transit zones. In these zones, they're often vulnerable to abuse, extortion, and violence in the hands of smugglers and local authorities. The consequence of this extended border control model has heightened a sense of separation between citizens and migrants, fueled by policies that stigmatize and criminalize migrants. This practice affects not only the migrant's journey, but also reshapes the communities through which they pass. Inside these transit countries, migrants also often experience heightened surveillance, detention, and discrimination, all of which reinforces a perception of migrants as illegal or criminal before they reach their receiving country's borders. I also want to shift a little bit or extend this to talk about the criminalization of those that accompany migrants. The rhetoric of protection is often misused against migration, with some forms of human mobility wrongly framed through an anti-human trafficking language as a justification for restrictive measures. This includes a tendency to blur the lines between trafficking and smuggling, as well as humanitarian aid, which overlooks the complex roles of those involved. Individuals labeled as criminals may include family members, humanitarian workers, human rights activists, healthcare providers, and even social workers or pastoral agents. An example of this that we can see is in the current case of Annunciation House, a Catholic nonprofit that operates several shelters in the El Paso area, helping migrants and asylum seekers with food, housing, and other assistance. The Texas Attorney General, Ken Paxton, is pursuing legal action against Annunciation House, alleging that they're operating a stash house and facilitating human smuggling. The lawsuit stems from Paxton's demand that Annunciation House release its records of shelter clients, which the organization has refused to do. But just last Friday, the Texas Supreme Court ruled that Paxton's legal actions to obtain records for the shelter guests and his desire to shut down the operation of Annunciation House can proceed. In conclusion, the framing of migration as a security issue complicates the long-term integration of migrants. When migrants are viewed as security threats, it erodes the humanity of the receiving society. It criminalizes kindness, fuels fear with host populations, and empowers populist and white ring agendas. The trend of securitization of migration, externalizing borders, and crimmigration not only serves as a tool for states to control transnational mobility, but also disciplines citizens by penalizing acts of compassion, criminalizing solidarity, and humanitarian aid. It is in this urgent context that the work you are doing to walk alongside migrants occurs. I commend you for your ministry of social and pastoral accompaniment of migrants. And now we'll hear about the National Pastoral Migratoria, a brilliant example of compassion, solidarity, and collaborative action for justice. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you so much. And thank you for the opportunity to share with you what's Pastoral Migratoria. And Maria is in our board, who's so helpful from the beginning of our ministry. We're gonna start. How did Pastoral Migratoria started? You might have heard that there is the U.S. Conference of Bishops launched the Catholic Campaign for Immigration Reform, which now is known as a Justice for Immigrants, in 2005, with an intent to really work to create awareness on the immigrant reality in our country. This is 2005, and eventually to work to serve the community if the legislation will pass. But after working a lot in 2007, the legislation failed, and the church was faced with the reality of undocumented immigrants, particularly what's the role of the church now that the legislation is not a reality. We have 11 million people in our midst. What to do? They are a very significant number of people. This 2007 are in our parishes. And here in Chicago, we did a lot of work in terms of for immigration reform. Of course, when this reality, we were so depressed, saying, what is God telling us? Now the immigration reform did not pass. Could we help each other, or should we wait for the other people to help us? Those were very important questions on what God is telling us and how could we respond. That's how Pastoral Migratoria, which is an immigrant to immigrant ministry, or is an immigrant social ministry, was founded in 2007 with as a foundational document, with the document of Aparecida. Aparecida, the architect of this document, was who eventually became Pope Francis. So Pope Francis is the one who really worked in this document. It was help us to reflect in what's the role of the church. Catholic social teaching is a blessing for me. I became Catholic 6 years after working in the Archdiocese of Chicago. I'm from Peru, and immigration has always been very close to me since I was in elementary school, in high school. Some of my friends in my elementary school and high school came from other places. They had to come to my small town, rural town. They had to walk for 12 hours or something with their parents, and coming only over the weekend, being migrants in the small town to go to school and then go back over the weekend. So I was very close to the reality of the migrant community in my rural town in Peru, and eventually in Lima, which is with the shanty towns. These are people, all migrants for all places, coming to the city, and then later in Chicago with the Cambodia, especially with the Vietnamese and people from the refugees who were in uptown. So that was a great experience for me to find a Christ in the midst of the community here in Chicago. And as a result of that, responding to those questions with the light of Catholic social teaching, I was a newly Catholic at that time, and I fall in love with Christianity. That really calls us to be to respond to everybody in every single human being is the face of Christ. And in this case, this undocumented immigrant who were hoping to have immigration reform, now it's not there. To this very moment, we have the reality. This has been already 18 years in this journey, or 20 years if we want to count since 2005. But this is where people have been in the parishes. So the document of Aparecida was very inspirational for us, and it calls for me one very important component of this ministry is leadership. These are who are the people, who are the ones who are going to be responding in charity and justice actions in the parish community. That's what Aparecida calls us and invites us to. That the church is ready to. It's called to respond in acts of charity and justice. But the who are that was a very important concept for me, and that's what Pope Francis talks a lot about, missionary disciples. And as a new convert in the Catholic Church, that has been a very important component of this ministry. So this ministry invites immigrants to respond their baptismal call, to be engaged in service, information resources, and also accompaniment, which is so critical at this time, and justice, to continue working in this journey for immigration reform, the legislative changes that needs to happen in order to bring back the dignity that people are lacking at this moment. So that's how Pastoral Migratoria started. And the methodology that we use is listening, learning, proclaiming. I know several people in this country, a lot of people in this country are very familiar with the see, judge, and act. We put a spin of evangelization. Everybody who is working in this ministry, they are very aware that everything that we do, who we are, is we're evangelizing. When we say, just for me, evangelization is radical. It's just being who we are. Is the DNA? It's in our blood. It's our part of our identity. So immigrants are being invited to come and say, "Here I am, God. Use my skills, my time. Who you gave me, the skills that you gave me, the gifts that you gave me, I can put in use, and you use me to serve the community, to accompany the community, work for justice." So this is not an initiative or a program. It is a ministry. So what the three components of Pastoral Migratoria is formation, commissioning, and implementation. So in this process of Catholic social teaching is very, very important. In the formation process, we have 7 sessions for formation, and each of them are connected with the principle of Catholic social teaching. And but what we've been doing with light of Aparecida, this document, and has been always to do faith and action. So we do have our pastoral formation sessions. We have a Catholic social teaching, an hour of Catholic social teaching, a principle, let's say, human dignity or dignity of work. But the other hour, we bring an expert. In this case, if it's work, dignity of work, the expert would be an attorney, an immigration and labor lawyer who brings the issues that undocumented immigrants, immigrants who are facing in the current situation, in the realities. What are the areas in the labor workplace that they need to learn to identify, but also the resources that need to be provided to the community. So always our formation sessions are a pastoral formation and a civic formation with an expert. After seven sessions. After the 7 sessions is when we have a commissioning. And this ministry started in Chicago in one parish, and we went to 3 and 10 and 20 and 30 and 40 and 70 parishes. This was before the pandemic. And also the ministry started in the Polish community in Chicago. We have 31 parishes in Polish in Polish. And so in the Polish community, it's called the Polish Immigrant to Immigrant Ministry. So in this commissioning, the people who are being formed are being, during Mass, there is a liturgy, it's a 5-minute liturgy. It took us a long time to institutionalize this ministry. Again, we call ministry, it's not an initiative or a program. In this moment, during Mass, the pastor is the one who decides where this 5-minute liturgy will happen, whether it's after the homily or during the announcement time. But during those 5 minutes, they are being blessed by the priest, and they are being introduced that these are the leaders who are going to be responding to the needs of the community. So these are pastoral migratory leaders, these are pastoral agents who are going to be responding to the needs of the community. That leader, and they receive a Bible signed by the bishop or by the cardinal, and also a Bible that is signed by the cardinal or the bishop, and a certificate that they participate in the initial formation. And that's the commissioning. After the commissioning is the implementation. They do the number one action in the parish is to do a survey. What are the needs of the community? We practice a lot of this aspect of synodality, of course, listening. We're not the leaders. This ministry doesn't respond, doesn't think like, oh, these are the needs or these are the issues. The needs and the issues in the community need to come from the community. That's why the survey is a very important component and a very important step in listening the needs. And then after identifying the priorities and the needs in the community, we partner with organizations, collaborators, whether it's governmental organizations, professional organizations. We work a lot with the consulates because there are a lot of these immigrants. They need the resources that the consulates provide. And we work very closely with the Consulate of Mexico. There is one program called the Consulate on Wheels. So they come to the parishes and they provide the documentations that the Mexicans need, or we work also with the Guatemalan consulate, with Ecuadorian consulate, with different consulates, whatever the area in the region people are needing. So we work with them. And let me just provide you a couple examples. What's happening? What are we doing in the last just connecting with what Maria presented to you, because one aspect that's happening in the recent is that 6 months since November with the new administration. Thank God we had the experience with the President Trump in his first term. The first thing that happened in the first term was people are, of course, like they are right now with the criminalization. People are very fearful, and we develop a peace circle for Pastoral Migratoria, where we offer a space where people could bring their fears, the issues that they are facing, in a small groups of 8 or 10. And we have 3 very important questions. How are you feeling now? So people would talk about their feelings. What are the issues they are facing? And the second question, what is God telling us in this moment, during this time? And the third, what could we do together? What are the needs in our community right now, in this moment, in this reality? So the impact of this administration, of course, created a lot of fear, the threat of family separation. The children are the ones who are being very fearful, and the children were the first people, I think, who brought the issue of need to come back and to create the peace circle model that we've done in 2000 in the first administration. So well, these were very successful time, a lot of tears. We need a lot of Kleenexes in this kind of setting, because people are crying, they're just bringing, and this is a sacred space in the church where we do train to trainers to facilitators, and that we've been working very close with Loyola University, Ibero University, and Maria has been very supportive and very instrumental in training our leaders to facilitate these peace circles. So we've done in the first administration. This time we improve. I think we develop a whole manual how to conduct a peace circle, and best practice of peace circles, and people are being trained how to facilitate, but also what to do next. After the peace circles, usually they want to focus in one specific area. Mental health is a major issue in the community, and we follow up with the specialists. That's why we work very closely with social workers or psychologists who've been providing support groups for the community. So accompaniment is a major area in our ministry. And the three pillars of our ministry of the implementation: service, accompaniment, and justice. That accompaniment has been one of the things that we've been really working a lot in the last 6 months, and working in the peace circles. We also have, once we have this ministry in parishes and teams of the parishes, so we have a bi-monthly forums in dioceses, and in these bi-monthly forums, we highlight one specific topic and one theme. The recent months, for example, we had like 2 weeks ago, it was our national forum, and the theme was how to speak to families on deportation, to children, to the family, this aspect of the deportation. So again, it's a mental health issue, but also very practical thing: how to prepare an emergency plan, how to do the guardianship issue, but also how to accompany each other, and the pastoral aspect. That's another piece that we always connected with prayer. Of course, that's another. We have a chaplain who's been extremely busy doing this, providing the support and accompanying families, and also among ourselves. I'll maybe just to finish, we are in the diocese here in Chicago. In 2017, we shared this model in we are in New York. Also, we're in Stockton, California. We're in Kansas City. We're in Baltimore. We're just starting this weekend. We had a formation training in Orange County, California. We're going to start in Los Angeles in the fall. We have 400 parishes in Los Angeles. That's a huge archdiocese. There's a lot of work there. And also we're in Newark, and very soon Washington, D.C., in Patterson, in New Jersey. So there's a lot of other dioceses who are very interested to start this ministry of service, accompaniment, and justice in parish communities, and with an immigrant ministry. I'll stop there, Father Greg, George.
Uh-huh. Well, thank you. Thank you for the wonderful work you're both doing. A question I have is a situation that I'm seeing at San Quentin more and more. We have a number of prisoners who were born in El Salvador, came to this country as children or babies even, were never documented. ended up being sentenced to state prison for a crime and are facing deportation to Seacoast in the mega prison in El Salvador upon parole. They're covered with tattoos. Most of them were gang members. And what can we be doing to help them avoid having to go to that horrible prison in El Salvador? Do they have any hope, in other words, of
Oh,
avoiding that?
that's a tough one, Father. Yeah. As Maria talked about criminal to avoid. I think the only thing right now would be to prevent. Right now, what we're in this crisis, what our focus is how to prevent deportation in families. So I was just in Orange. We had a lawyer who did a session and was teaching to the whole community in practical things. Like one was using your hands, like sign language type of thing. 3 things that they can remember. Do not open the door. Be quiet, like close, don't say, don't respond, don't open the door, don't sign, call your lawyer, call your 3 things is you're so in a just to protect families. At this point, some of the cases are very complicated. They could ICE could come, but now to me, for the church is called how to protect the separation families as much as we're able to. Legal assistance is one of the things, and I know the lawyer was just saying, and we know there's not enough lawyers, and not just that. There are coming some lawyers who are becoming who are taking advantage, and especially some people. So how to protect even from the lawyers who are not helpful for the family. So that would be the only thing I could come up, Father George, in terms of protection of families right now. We are, I would say, every time seems the families are cornered, like literally every single things are cornered. And what we talk in Pastoral Migratory is how to accompany each other and ask God's assistance in protecting these families. That's the only thing. In some cases, that's the only thing we can do. Just for them to know that they are not alone. There is somebody there. The church is with them, and we will be with us until the last minute, the last moment.
I was just going to add a comment supporting what Elena is saying. One of the things that people may not be aware of, at least my students are often surprised that individuals who are involved in immigration proceedings can have access to an attorney if they pay for an attorney, but one is not assigned to them if they without cost to them. And so this problem of access to legal representation is a really difficult and thorny one. And I think it's all the more critical in this moment. It provides some protection, but we're seeing the limits of that protection with like some of the really high profile cases. And the other thing I was going to say, I also think that probably the best strategy at this point now is the one Elena's talking about, where how to prevent people from having encounters with ICE that can lead to detention. And then finally, and one other thing I was going to say, one of the things that we're trying to institute in the School of Social Work at Loyola, where I teach, is to develop a forensic mental health clinic that could provide assessments that could be used in immigration legal proceedings to support different types of cases for immigration relief. So there's a shortage of lawyers, but there's an even more serious shortage of mental health professionals that can provide those sorts of assessments pro bono or at a low cost, because it's, again, there's also people who are taking advantage of that as well. Yeah.
Another phenomenon that I'm seeing here in California, a number of workers that I know of who are just self-deporting at this point because they're just living in fear and they don't want to end up getting caught up in in a detention center. What advice would you give them? Should
The one who self-deported, that if they are from Mexico, one thing that I learned, that's one thing that we work a lot with the consulate. They have really good programs in Mexico, particularly for those people who are going back. A lot of them are English-speaking people. They don't speak Spanish, some of them, so they have employment processes, employment resources for them, what kind of work they can have, and identity processes, documentation for those. There are I don't recall exactly the thing, but I know there are several services for them in Mexico. So that's one thing that we have our institute in November, and we're doing one session in the Consul of Mexico, bringing all these dioceses for them to take with them. Everything is digital. Everything is digital. So they will show us where to find how to communicate and to share these resources, people who are being self-deported. Yeah.
And I would also encourage families that are mixed status and say if the parents are undocumented and are deciding to self-deport, but are taking their U.S. citizen children with them, that they do some planning and preparation for that in terms of getting their children's citizenship, Mexican citizenship, recognized in the documents for that. Because many parents, I mean, don't do that. And it facilitates the kids getting access to healthcare as well as the education system in Mexico. And go ahead, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I'm thinking of some of the people I know. Some are Mexican, some are Guatemalan, for example. How about non-Mexican citizens who are self-deporting to Central America?
Central America. In El Salvador, in Honduras, I'm talking about in 2009, 10, they used to have really good programs of reintegration. Since all the things happening in Central America, I doubt it that they have now. I remember even vividly somebody who was working in Broadview Detention Center who did a lot of, we are here every single Friday, we'll be there tomorrow. But this young lady went back when she's an American, but she went to Guatemala to develop a program to welcome people who are coming back to Guatemala. So I don't know if that program already exists, but they were very active for 5-10 years. This was in the past, but yeah, non-for-profit pastoral. Most likely they are developing something, but at a federal level or the national, I doubt it. Mexico is the one who's been developing some other programs for people returning.
Yeah.
I was also going to mention, and Father Williams, you're probably aware of him as being a Jesuit, but Jesuit, the network of Jesuit migrant services for Central and North America, as well as now the Jesuit Refugee Services has been supported by the Ignatian Solidarity Network to establish what they're calling the Migrant Accompaniment Network that tries to accompany migrants in motion. So most of the work has been done like to support in the past support migrants in transit towards the north, but now a lot of the same humanitarian aid organizations that they work with through their social pastoral work, both of these networks, is helping with re-entry and reintegration.
And we will put up the links to those groups and as well as to your groups Pastoral Migratoria as well. So those who are watching this later will have to have that information handy to contact you. But thank you both for this wonderful work you're doing in this difficult time we're living in. Thank God there are people like you who are kind of spearheading some approaches to help so many people right now who are just living in fear in our country. So thank you for that. Again, thank you for being with us today. And we ask you to continue to support us in your prayer as well as supporting all those people we've been talking about today who are facing so much a difficult time in our country around the issues of immigration and criminalization of immigration. So thank you again, Maria and Elena, for your time, and may God bless you in your work.